Have you always wanted to be a ninja? Did you watch Naruto and think, wow, imagine if I had shadow clones? Well, then this is the build for you. What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to show you the build that I used to get all the way to 100 and had a lot of fun doing so. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So for our skills, we want to start off with Puncture, going into Enhanced Puncture and then Fundamental Puncture to give us more chance to vulnerable, for especially for bosses, because you can't really trigger a Shadow Explosion to hit them. Moving on to our core skills, we do take Twisting Blades with Enhanced Twisting Blades and Advanced Twisting Blades. And then we also do take Sturdy for more close damage reduction and Siphoning Strikes, which also works with our Temerity. Whenever we heal, we can get Barrier if it's over heal. Moving on to Agility, we do take Shadow Step with Enhanced Shadow Step and Disciplined Shadow Step. And then Dash with Enhanced Dash and Methodical Dash, and you want to put more points into Dash over Shadow Step just purely because putting points into Dash reduces its cooldown, which means you have it up more often, and it is one of our best mobilities. We also take Weapon Master, maxed out, and if you're using swords, I think the 9% increased damage benefits more than anything else. Moving on to our Subterfuge, we don't take any actual skills here, but we do take Agile, which increases the cooldown of our dodge. And we take Exploit to deal more damage to healthy and injured enemies, as well as Malice to deal more damage to vulnerable enemies. Then under Imbuement, we of course take Shadow Imbuement with Enhanced Shadow Imbuement and Blended Shadow Imbuement, which makes every time a Shadow Explosion hits something else more vulnerable. We do also take 1 point to Shadow Crash, so we can maximize consuming shadows, which lets us get a lot more energy back, and then we can spam Twisting Blades more often. We also take Precision Imbuement, where our skills gain more critical strike chance. And then moving up to our ultimate, we of course take Shadow Clone, Prime Shadow Clone, and Supreme Shadow Clone. Shadow Clone's great because of the unstoppable thing, so whenever you're getting CC'd really hard, just pop that if you don't have Shadow Step up, or vice versa. And then we also take Aftermath, so that whenever we spam all of our energy, if we pop Shadow Clone, we go back to pretty much full energy, and then we can start spamming our skills again. And for the key passives, we do take Victimize, because we make the whole screen vulnerable, and dealing damage to them has more of a chance to like make another explosion. Between that, the Shadow Explosions and the Cold Explosions, which will come from the boots, and one of our other legendary aspects. There's a lot of explosions happening. And then moving on to our Paragon tree. So starting off, you can come up to this rare node right here for Prime, and then move into the Glyph node, where you will put your Infusion Glyph socket. So every time, for every 5 intelligence within the radius, your imbued skills get a certain amount increased damage. And then you do want to take both this as well as the Lawless node. And then moving up into our first Paragon board. You will come back for this later. This isn't really necessary at the beginning, but once you're done in the skill tree, you can come back for it. So for the first one we have is Eldritch Bounty. When you attack with an imbued skill, you gain 20% resistance and 20% increased damage for that imbuement's element. And then we also come down here and take the Imbuer node. Moving all the way up to here, we take Sophist Resilience. That's a weird one. And come back here for Ready Supply. Move right into the Glyph, where we take Efficacy, which gives us 125% bonus to all rare nodes in range. That being Potent, which gives us more imbued skill damage. And Dosage, which you may as well take. It's a little bit of dexterity as well as an increase to your potion healing. Moving up to our second Paragon board, we take Exploit Weakness, which makes us do more damage to vulnerable enemies. And then moving at the very beginning, we go right into the glyph here, where we take combat. So for every 5 intelligence, our core skills, which is our twisting blades, does more critical strike damage. And if you meet the requirement, it also gives us an energy cost. The restore whenever we blow them up. And then again, we take the dosage rare node because it's right there, as well as the artifice, more vulnerable damage. Moving all the way up here, hunter killer, more damage to elites. Hold resilience and maximum life. It's close enough that like putting an extra 3 Paragon points will get you a decent amount of bonus for what it's worth. And of course, you come down here to take the legendary node, and then you move into unassailable, so damage reduction from enemies that you make vulnerable, which is again the whole screen. And exploit for more vulnerable damage and some damage to injured enemies as well. And last but not least, and this is the one that combines with our boots, is the cheap shot legendary node. So you deal increased 5% damage for every each near by enemy that is crowd controlled. And starting off, you want to move into Oppress, so you do more damage to crowd controlled enemies. And here you have damage reduction from elites. And then from the Oppress node, you move down here, get the legendary node, and then keep trailing off till you come here. Go around to Devious, which is more damage to crowd control, as well as Cutthroat skill damage, which again Twisting Blades is. Down here to pick up the glyph, where we take Closer. So for every 5 dexterity purchased within the range, our Cutthroat skills, which is our Twisting Blades, deals 6% more damage. Coming back down here, we get Wiles for more damage reduction, as well as Cutthroat skill reduction. This is the only requirement on the Paragon tree I don't meet for the bonus one, and honestly, it's such a tight fit that if you don't meet it, you don't meet it. If you do, that's great. You'll get 6% more damage reduction from slowed enemies. Moving on down, you come here and take the Spearhead node, which is a little bit of damage to healthy enemies. Decent amount, actually. Plus some armor bonuses. And then up here, again, the calculated damage to crowd-controlled enemies. After that, if you're still leveling to 100, you want to put your Paragon points in anything that's, for example, like vulnerable damage, non-physical damage, stuff like that. If you want armor, if you feel like your build needs to be tankier, you can take armor as well. And then just fill up anything else, like max health is good, non-physical damage, imputed skill damage. All these are good to take, like fill extras. Resistance, not so great for now, because they haven't reworked it yet, but hopefully one day they do, and it'll make a lot more of a difference. That still remains to be seen. But yeah, that's it for the skills. And oh, sorry, actually I forgot the specializations. So you do take preparation. Every 100 energy you spend reduces your ultimate skill's cooldown by 4%. Using ultimate skill resets all the cooldowns of your other skills. So ideally you spam Twisting Blades, you pop your Shadow Clone, everything else. Everything's reset, and then while you're spamming Twisting Blades, every 100 energy you spend reduces the cooldown of your Shadow Clone by another 4 seconds. Typically, you can have Shadow Clone up in most fights every, like, 10 to 15 seconds, really, if you want. But yeah, that's it for the skills, specializations, and the Paragon tree for this build. So for our gear, we're going to start off with Temerity. So these pants effectively makes us a lot tankier, just because any overheal that we do, including from the lucky hit on them, to get extra barrier. This is the highest one I've ever rolled, unfortunately, and I've gotten 5 or 6 of them. But it also does combine very well with our Victimize passive, so whenever our Victimize explodes, we have this aspect, so that it heals us for a certain amount of time, which again, this overheal gets converted to shield. And stats on your helmet that you really want are cooldown reduction, as well as shadow imbuement. Besides that, all stats, total armor, main stat, anything you can really get that'll benefit this build. on your helmet, do it. We would ideally want a Shaco here, but given its rarity, I do not have one. For our chest piece, we have the aspect where our basic skills grant us 20% damage reduction for more seconds. Another stats you want in your armor: max life, cutthroat, skill damage, imbuement, skill damage, total armor, stats. All of those are very good to have. For our gloves, we use Grasp of the Shadow, which gives us attack speed, more vulnerable damage, shadow clone damage, and +3 to all core skills, as well as a lucky hit chance to make another clone that will use our Twisting Blades alongside us. Part of the whole clone idea. For our boots, we take the Penitent Greaves, which is why we take the Cheap Shot node. It leaves a trail of frost under us, which chills enemies, which is effectively crowd control, and gives us a lot more enemies with that. And it combines very well with our aspect here, so damaging a chilled or frozen enemy with a shadow imbued skill has up to 75% chance to release an explosion, target surrounding enemies, and chilling them for 15%. That's a very nice combo right there. For your weapon, you also want to try to get like main stats, core skill damage, damage to close enemy, critical strike damage. Anything that you really do in this build, which is crit, imbued, or cutthroat, and vulnerable, are all very good to have, as well as dexterity gives our main stat more damage. For our crossbow, and this has to be on the crossbow, is the Twisting Blades aspect. So our Twisting Blades orbit for a short time when they return, and this is again a very well-rolled crossbow. So we have critical strike damage with imbued skills, critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, and our main stat. It's a pretty crazy crossbow. For our amulet, we do take Disobedience, and we want to put this on our amulet because it gives 1.5 potency to the aspect, so you can get up to pretty much 3/4 of your armor as extra armor when this is maxed out, due to the fact that there's the shadow explosions, the victimized explosions, and the possible chill explosions. You build this up almost instantly. Max. Again, stats you want here: imbuement skill, damage reduction is good. Damage after dodging isn't great, but cutthroat skill damage is, so overall it's a pretty good amulet. For our rings, so our imbuement skills have 40% increased potency against vulnerable enemies, which they usually are. Critical strike chance is very good. Critical strike damage, imbued critical strike damage, damage to close enemies, all those stats are very good. This here has 3 perfect skill modifiers, and the imprint on it is making an enemy vulnerable, has up to 42% chance. Increase your critical strike chance by 3%, up to 9%. And again, critical strike damage, max modifier, critical strike chance, max modifier, and critical strike damage with imbued skills, all fully max modifiers. This is one of the craziest rings I've ever seen. The lucky hit chance, like, it's nice, but I don't even care about it. It's just because the other 3 stats are so insane. And our final weapon, and this is one of those special unique weapons. You could use a regular one. I actually like this one. It fits well into the build and gives a significant damage boost. 12% shadow damage, 12% damage to affected by shadow damage over time enemies, and main stat. And the imprint on this makes the build work really well because it makes our clones have our imbuements alongside us. So both the ones from the Shadow Clone Ultimate as well as Grasp of the Shadow Clones will all be imbued whenever you are imbued. But yeah, other than that, in your armor pieces, you want to put rubies for more maximum life. Makes you a little bit tankier. In our weapons, we obviously put emeralds for critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. And until they fix resist, in our jewelry, we put skulls for the extra armor. And that's it for the gear. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is if you're pushing Nightmare Dungeons, there's a few affixes that are just really, really bad to have on your Nightmare sigils. And those are as follows: Death Pulse, Drifting Shade, Empowered Elite Suppressor one. This is one of the ones I hate the most. Lightning Storm, just because you're trying to be as mobile as possible, it's very annoying. Monster Vulnerable Resist. The Barrier Breakers, because we always usually have Barrier up, it just straight up causes them to do double damage, which is not something we want. Armor Breakers, pretty much for the same reason. We're trying to stack armor, not lose armor. Dodge Breakers, again, trying to dodge stuff, not get hit by stuff. And Monster Shadow Damage over time resist. Everything else, not so bad. These, though, will and can ruin your run. And then the other thing I want to talk about is for the elites themselves. There's 4 affixes that stand out that are terrible. And those are the Suppressor one, obviously. Chilling Wind, because there's such a high time amount of crowd control that if you don't have Unstoppable, like your ultimate or Shadow Clone in high tier Nightmare dungeons, you're just going to die if you get crowd controlled by those. And as a melee character, you're always in their face. Terrifying, also bad, because it can make you run into a bunch of stuff you don't want to run into. And last but not least, Vampiric, just because it's annoying. It's not so bad if there's a group of mobs, but if there's one elite left and it's by itself as a build that's not great at single target, it'll just make your run more annoying. But yeah, that's for the bad affixes from Nightmare Dungeons and the elites. Everything else isn't bad at all. That is going to be it for this video, guys. The one thing I would like to note about this build, like I said, it's a lot of fun and it excels at killing mobs. However, the one thing it does not excel at is single target. Killing bosses will be your worst nightmare. That being said, you can do bosses. You can kill bosses. It's just going to take a bit longer than some of the other builds out there, especially for something like Uber Lilith. That being said, it is a very, very fun build. Anyways, my social media information, as always, is in the video description below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.